Hey guys, welcome back to the Bible reading plan. We're in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 today, and Paul's going to be talking about food offered to idols, but I think we can get something out of the heart of this message, even though it's not really in our context today with idol worship in that way. But so the context here is that the Jews and Gentiles have now become Christian, and the Jews are still going and buying buying meat from butchers that they know do not set aside, meat for idol worship. But the Gentiles are kind of getting whatever they can, and they're going. And if the meat is set aside for idol worship and it's cheaper, they just get what they can get. But the Jew Christians are upset about the Gentiles getting meat offered to idols. So it's a confusing thing. But Paul in starting verse 1, he addresses something before he goes into this, and he just says. Now concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. This knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. So he's saying, hey, first guys, before I go into this topic, I want to ask you, are you pursuing knowledge above your love for God? Are you trying to take this knowledge you have and push it on other people? Are you puffing yourself up with knowledge, or are you loving God? Because to love God is to be known by God. Are you using worldly wisdom, or are you using the wisdom of God, which is loving Him, and which is this relationship with Him, becoming more like Him? But then he goes on to say, therefore, as to eating food offered to idols, we know that an idol has no real existence. There's no God but one. So he's saying, as far as you being worried about food offered to other idols, well, these other idols don't exist. So if you're eating food that has been, maybe set aside to be offered to them, there's no real substance there. So it's not a sin to eat food offered that was set aside to be offered to idols, because there's no idol, there's no God, there's no false God that existed. This is just a figment of your imagination. And if you can eat this food that was set aside to be offered to idols, eat it to the glory of God. These idols don't exist, right? That's what he's saying. And this goes back to the freedom that we have in Christ, this freedom of the knowledge that we get from Christ, to be no longer under the law, right? And no longer under the law, having this freedom in Christ, this freedom not to sin. It comes with this ability to kind of do a lot of things. There's this gray area. If we want to eat food that was set aside to offer to idols, sure, we can do it. If we want to go and, like Paul later on says, and dine in a temple of a false idol, and we know it's not bad, we know that the idol doesn't, or this false god doesn't exist, then we're free to do that. But Paul is saying you need to watch how other believers perceive you, especially the young believers, especially the weak that do believe this is bad, that don't know their freedoms in Christ. So if a Jew believes that this is just a total wrong thing to eat food sacrificed to idols, he's like, don't do that in front of them. If you do it, do not do that in front of them. Do not weaken their faith. Do not make them stumble because you're exercising your freedoms. And Paul's saying, we, as the strong who know our liberty in Christ, are going to have to sacrifice our freedoms, because someone might feel hurt towards that. Maybe a Jew feels hurt towards seeing food offered to idols, or a Gentile who has come out of idol worship still feels hurt when he sees his other Gentile brothers and sisters eating food that was set aside to be offered to idols, and he feels like that is wrong. And if you were here this Sunday, as I'm recording this is Sunday night, we talked about the scruples of the week, this feeling that something is wrong, but not really having much to back it up. You just feel like it's wrong. And, Paul tells us to bear with the failings of the week, bear with the scruples of the week. We don't necessarily need to change our beliefs or order our beliefs around them, but we need to live in a way that our faith is mindful of others. We do not need to live in an individual way, like maybe our culture in America would say, be an individual only, live for yourself. But we want to live in a communal way that says, live for other people, live in the light. Yes, you have freedom in Christ, but live in such a way that your freedom in Christ doesn't harm your other believers, doesn't weaken them in the faith. And yes, it isn't good that they are being harmed by this thing that you are free to do, but even so, bear one another's burdens in that. And Paul says, if anyone sees you who have knowledge, who you have knowledge of the freedom, eating in an idol temple. This is verse 10. If anyone sees you who have knowledge of the freedom, eating in an idol's temple, will he not be encouraged if his conscience is weak to eat food offered to idols? So will he not jump to conclusions? We need to live in a way so our weak believers, our young believers who don't know their freedoms, won't jump to conclusions. They won't be confused. And so by your knowledge, this weak person is destroyed, the brother for whom Christ died. Thus sinning against your brother and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. Paul's saying, live in such a way that you live with the other person in mind, the other person's faith in mind. You're mindful of the weaknesses of others. You're bearing with the scruples of those who are weak. And we're all in weak in areas. We all have different scruples, and we all hope that our brother and sister, when we are weak, will bear with us in those things, will not trample over us in the name of freedom in Christ. And, I think that this is something that we can take. Yes, there's freedom in Christ, but we don't need to be prideful and lift ourselves up and over-exercise our freedom in Christ. And we're over-exercising our freedom in Christ when we're putting our brother and sister down and we're discouraging them and we're causing a divide in the church because we know this is right and we know we can do this, and we're going to shame our brother and sister by impending this on them when they have this conviction or this little scruple. But thank you for joining me. I would challenge you to live in a communal way.